In this video, Gil T explains whether for purposes of health, longevity and anti-aging, guys on TRT should use human growth hormone injections or an HGH secretagogue. Is HGH worth it? What are the benefits of HGH for men's health?
This is the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. And if you want to learn all about the science-based information on this topic, consider subscribing, hit that notification bell, and you'll be on your way.
So, welcome to the video everyone. Again with us is Gil T. He's driving for the moment, but he's willing to do a video on human growth hormone, and that especially for health, longevity and anti-aging. So Gil, is HGH worth it for anti-aging purposes, and what are the benefits if so?
Hey Steve, good to see you again. So human growth hormone, something that is often touted by the masses, and unfortunately I think most people don't really quite understand what it is, what its mechanisms are, and what it's all about. Everyone tends to think, and again, this is just from my own anecdotal experience, people tend to think that anytime someone is doing steroids, quote unquote, they're using growth hormone. And they think that growth hormone makes you grow and it makes your muscles bigger. And that is essentially like God's gift to physiques, right? So people have no idea about anything anabolic or TRT or anything whatsoever always say, oh yeah, he must be on growth hormone, because that's what they hear about and that's what they read. And then some of the athletes, talk about it and they think this is like a miracle drug. First, we have to understand what growth hormone is. It's a naturally occurring hormone in the human body. It is produced by the pituitary gland, and it is stimulated from the hypothalamus by a hormone known as GHRH. This stands for growth hormone releasing hormone. So the hypothalamus sends this down to the pituitary, which then releases human growth hormone. This tends to peak around puberty. Okay, it is at the lowest point in adolescence when children are younger, and it tends to peak at puberty. Yes, it's responsible for growth. It'll grow every single cell in your body without bias. It'll grow your organs, your bones, all connective tissue, and so forth. So why is it not this magical drug that everyone thinks it is if we're talking about growth, when we're talking about muscle, right? You have to understand that the way muscle hypertrophy occurs is very different to what growth hormone actually does. Growth hormone is a very good analog. Hair starts of it. Now, big factor in growth hormone is something called IGF-1 or insulin-like growth factor 1. This is something produced in the liver, and it is triggered by growth hormone secretion. IGF-1 is anabolic, literally to insulin, but insulin-like growth factor. It acts on two cell surface receptors, and one of them happens to be the insulin receptor, but that's not the dominant one. I'll come back to that in a minute because it's important to understand that it does also bind and act on the insulin receptor, and I'll tell you why in a minute. IGF-1 levels tend to fluctuate often, and they also tend to get deficient. And when they are deficient, either in aging or in people with pituitary deficiencies for growth hormone, on the second one I just mentioned, in the United States, it is indicated to be prescribed for children under the product called somatropin, which is essentially a synthetic growth hormone, or what they call recombinant growth hormone. So it is a exogenous hormone that's injected, and it mimics our body's natural growth hormone. And again, it's indicated by prescription for children. It is extremely expensive, and it is difficult to get insurance to cover it. And even when they do, often the co-pays are significant, so it can cost thousands of dollars for this treatment. Now let's fast forward for a minute. Bodybuilders tend to use somatropin in high doses. Growth hormone is treated in bodybuilding as a miracle drug. And you have to understand that this is often dosed in IUs or international units. Bodybuilders on the high level scale, I have heard using 18 to 26 IUs per day. To give you an indication of what that is in comparison to what we call the anti-aging dose that guys on TRT may benefit from, that's 2 IUs per day. So again, bodybuilders, 18 to 26 IUs on the pro level, 8, 10, 12 IUs on the smaller amateur level, 2 IUs for a relatively safe, and I'll come back to that again, relatively safe anti-aging dose. Now, there are significant risks with exogenous growth hormone. For starters, much like testosterone, it will suppress endogenous production. Second, there are risks associated with potential type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance from prolonged or excessive growth hormone leading to elevated IGF-1. Because remember what I said earlier, IGF-1 tends to act on 2 receptors, one being the insulin receptor. And this binds the insulin receptor and deems the insulin unable to do its job, and therefore blood glucose may elevate. So we often find guys using growth hormones or analogs or secretagogues with elevated blood sugar. This is another reason why a lot of the heavier bodybuilders will use insulin together with growth hormone. Number one, you get the extra anabolic effect of delivering nutrients. And number two, you are helping to reduce blood glucose levels, which will spike significantly with elevated IGF-1. What we prefer to do in the medical field when guys want to get the growth hormone benefits without the potential risks, and I say without potential risks with a little asterisk because there's always potential risks, but they are far easier to mitigate and manage when you use a growth hormone secreting analog such as growth hormone secreting hormones and growth hormone secreting peptides. When you use these in conjunction, rather than suppressing endogenous production and replacing it with the synthesized version of the exogenous growth hormone itself, like somatropin, you're simply stimulating your pituitary gland to release more of its own by replacing the GHRH that would have been released out of the hypothalamus. So you're artificially giving your body the signal to make more of your own endogenous natural growth hormone. Again, why is this safer? You can't overdose on a hormone that you naturally produce, right? Similar analogy, if I gave you a ton of HCG, your testosterone will never reach 5,000 nanograms per deciliter because I'm not giving you an exogenous testosterone, I'm giving you a secretagogue, something that's forcing you to make more. So that is why when you have risk associations with things like IGF-1, both for diabetic markers, as well as if you have any cancerous cells or tumors, which will cause rapid proliferation with elevated IGF, then again, these are mitigated by not overdosing on the hormone exogenously. Secondly, the pricing of the secretagogues is usually a quarter or a third of what the actual somatropin pricing is. So it's a much more affordable route, and it is a far safer route. And we can get a little more into the dosing and protocols if you'd like. But in a nutshell, this is what growth hormone is. This is what it does. And, a lot of guys have a big misconception over it.
Okay, Gil. So what are these secretagogues? I know they're known by numbers and names, but do you have any experience with them? What are they?
I do, because we happen to prescribe them to patients who wish to get the anti-aging and other benefits associated with growth hormone therapy in a safe and, more importantly, legal manner, because we are governed by the U.S. medical boards and FDA and DEA, and we cannot put out things that are unsafe or illegal. And I know people do go out and get somatropin for adults, but again, like I said before, safety and legality are an issue. Yeah, the secretagogues are significantly safer. Some of the benefits, and I'll get into the types of them, but some of the benefits, at least from my personal experience, both for myself as well as patients, is first and foremost improved sleep, drastically improved sleep. When you're using it fasted at night before bed, and I say fasted meaning 2 hours, no insulin spikes, right before bed, subcutaneously, The sleep quality by day 3 or 4, literally after you start, is dramatically improved. You're getting much more REM sleep. You're starting to experience vivid dreams. You're starting to sleep deeper and feel more relaxed when you wake up in the morning. So that is the number one benefit for me, as well as some of the people that I've spoken to who have experienced it. Hair, skin, nails, essentially anything the body requires healing and rejuvenating is going to be enhanced on a greater level. Some of the other benefits associated with growth hormone secretagogues tend to take a little bit longer to kick in. If you're looking for it for the anabolic values, it is really, really good to run it alongside testosterone. It is fairly weak on its own for guys that are not already on TRT. But you're usually going to start to get that in around 3 to 6 months. So it is more of a long-term approach. And the benefit of using secretagogues, again, being as safe as they are, they do not need to be cycled. They can be run long-term as long as it's on relatively low maintenance doses. We like to dose them at 5 days on, 2 days off. I often tell guys, go Monday through Friday and then take the weekend off. And you can run the doses of anywhere from 100 to 200 micrograms, not milligrams, micrograms per day on these agents. The common ones that we like to use are a growth hormone secreting hormone called sermorelin and a growth hormone secreting peptide called ipamorelin. And when you couple those two together, they tend to have a compounding effect on each other and work even more efficiently. Unfortunately, we used to use a compound called CJC 1295, also known as modified GRF 1-29. And modified GRF simply means modified growth releasing factor. The 1-29 stands for the first 29 aminos in the growth hormone chain. By the way, growth hormone has 191 aminos. So the first 1 through 29 are what is known as sermorelin. And sermorelin was modified for an extended half-life to match that of ipamorelin. And that essentially gave you CJC 1295. And that was coupled beautifully with ipamorelin. Recently, some things have changed, and some pharmacies, according to the FDA, are no longer able to compound CJC. So now we're back to coupling sermorelin, which was the first GHRH that was produced with the ipamorelin together. And again, they work really well. I've personally used them together for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're not talking about the oral versions like MK677 and things like that?
I'm not, but I'm glad you touched on it because oftentimes guys are going to gravitate towards an oral administration naturally out of either fear of needles or just ease of use. And here's the problem with MK677. And by the way, this is a name that was given to it by the SARMs websites and distributors. MK was Merck, 677 was the number assigned to this medication when it was under review. It never made it to market as a name brand by Merck, and it was squashed. And often you'll see all the SARMs having these names of letters and numbers. The letter represents the manufacturer, the number represents the drug number prior to having a name. So MK677 is the unofficial name, and it is actually not a SARM. And it is it's a secretagogue, okay? And it's a ghrelin agonist, which is the mechanism of action. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone in the stomach. And when ghrelin agonists go to work, they also help boost IGF-1. The problem is it gives you insane appetite. So guys will tend to raid the fridge and overconsume calories and gain weight. You combine that with the elevated blood glucose and the insulin resistance, and they start to hold on to water and get bloated and get blood pressure. So this is the biggest problem with the ghrelin agonists. So again, hunger is a very big disadvantage to most guys because it'll cause uncontrolled cravings, and guys will tend to binge on junk food all day long as a result of recognizing ghrelin. Another issue is that when you do so, you're not only eating bad foods, but you're also becoming insulin resistant due to the IGF-1 spike, and your blood glucose tends to elevate. You tend to retain water, increase blood pressure, etc. And for this reason, I don't recommend it to most guys. The only guys I do see benefit from it on a relatively short term of maybe a 30-day run are people who struggle to eat, really have a loss of appetite, and they are underweight. I have seen guys gain 10, 12, 15 pounds in a matter of 30 days using MK677, which, by the way, the pharmaceutical name is ibutamorin, because this is the compound in pharmacies to manufacture it. This is the official name. So MK677, research chemical sold on websites. Ibutamorin, same medication, same compound, actual pharmaceutical grade produced by compounded pharmacies.
I read somewhere that the secretagogues, if they're oral or injectable, that the older you get, the less your body is able to put out growth hormone, so that they aren't very useful anymore if you go over 40, 45. I read that somewhere. Isn't that correct?
I wouldn't necessarily put a number like 40 or 45. I mean, you and I are both in our mid-40s, and I think we could both benefit from them. I think it's more individual than that. It's like saying HCG doesn't work when you're 45. Think of a secretagogue like HCG. That's what HCG is. It's a secretagogue. It mimics luteinizing hormone. Therefore, it causes testicular function to produce and secrete testosterone. If you're primary hypogonadal and your Leydig cells are essentially dead, HCG is moot, right? It's not going to work because you're not going to secrete any hormone just because you stimulate it. You can't poke a dead horse and expect it to get up and run. However, if your pituitary gland does produce growth hormone fairly adequately but slightly deficient, or even sufficiently, but for whatever reason you feel you want it higher, these secretagogues will stimulate it. Think of this as raising your luteinizing hormone. You raise luteinizing hormone, you raise testosterone endogenously, as long as you're capable of producing. Now, if you're so grossly deficient in growth hormone, where your endogenous production is non-existent or minimal, sure, a secretagogue at that point is going to do the same thing HCG would have to a primary guy. You're going to need to replace it with a synthetic form. And bear in mind all the risks I mentioned earlier. The age specific is not really something I like to focus on, because you got a 45-year-old with great hormone level, and then we got 30-year-olds with atrocious hormone levels. And I mean, like I said earlier, this is indicated for children with deficiencies. So you have adolescents who do not secrete their own growth hormone and need a replacement. So age or naming numbers is not something I'm a fan of as a blanket policy, because then people are going to use that to say this is my entry point, or this is not going to work for me. And again, it's more individualistic. One thing I do want to point out, very important, do not get on TRT and go jumping on growth hormone analogs. And here's the reason why. Androgen therapy, testosterone specifically, increases IGF-1 levels. So if you're deficient or mildly deficient, need for you to check your labs and ask for an IGF-1, and you may be surprised. I've seen IGFs go from 150 to 270 with just TRT. And then you're going to throw in a growth hormone analog, you're going to be in the 350, 400 range, which isn't very safe long term. So ideally, you want to be in that 270 to maybe 320 range if you're going to cruise there for a bit. T may get you there. Good healthy lifestyle, quality sleep, which is going to be improved with IGF, is going to get you there probably. So wait and check before you go ahead and double stack this.
Okay. One last thing to come back to the bodybuilding world, Gil. So from what you're saying, maybe it's more interesting for bodybuilders to inject directly insulin-like growth factor, isn't it?
Well, bodybuilders tend to use growth hormone. It does have benefits outside of just IGF-1. But yeah, bodybuilders do use IGF-1 directly. It's very hard to find these days. And from what I have heard from some old school bodybuilders who used it back in the 70s, the pumps they get from real IGF-1, which is often faked, but if you get real IGF-1, the pumps they get, they described as painful. Now, bodybuilders don't use the word painful. I'm talking pro bodybuilders. They don't use the word painful, because what the average person deems as painful is often just discomfort. You know when things are painful. Pain is pain. Pain is agonizing. Doing a set of squats and thinking like you want to re-rack it and then doing 3 more and you say that was painful, that's just semantics. That's not pain. That's uncomfortable. Breaking your leg is painful, right? I've heard guys telling me IGF-1 pumps were painful. When you got a guy who's been bodybuilding for 35, 40 years, using every compound under the sun, and he said something is painful, I take that to heart. And I don't know if it's something that I would necessarily want to experiment with, but you know, it's around and it's available if you look hard enough, and everyone can do what they please. Personally, I think that when we have things that are tried and tested, they give you the intended purpose. And let's just assume here that your average listener here is not a professional bodybuilder. These secretagogues work. They'll improve your life. They'll do it safely. They'll make you happy. They'll make you sleep. You'll feel better. Why do you want to go out and push the extremes? That's my philosophy. But adults can do what they please.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Gil, thank you so much for explaining, clarifying all that. Have a safe drive.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Steve, as always.
Hey, and thank you for watching this video. Now do this next. Click on one of these thumbnails to watch another video and learn a ton more about TRT and hormone optimization.